today we look at prepositions. These little words can cause a lot of confusion, particularly due to the fact that in this regard, there are perhaps as many rules as there are exceptions. This general tendency is typical of other grammar rules as well, and is in itself not necessarily a bad thing. Some even say that this might be part of the reason, at least, why the English language has become such a prolific and functional international language. I'm not entirely sure about that. Still, for today, I invite you to be gentle to yourselves, to relax a little about the rules, if only for this last episode of Season 1.
Herzlich willkommen zum English Coach Podcast, präsentiert von trainingtree.de, die personalisierte Lösung im Bereich Erwachsenenbildung. Und jetzt dein Gastgeber. Er sagt zwar immer ich und dich, ansonsten ist sein Deutsch fantastisch. iAntonio Patterson.
Well, again, welcome to this episode 16 of the English Coach Podcast and the last in Season 1, where I attempt to add a splash of color and life to your learning experience by inviting you to live the language, where it's all about learning to dance with the language, where learning doesn't have to feel like work, and where I help you to help yourself not only to learn, but also to hold on to the things that you've learned. It's okay to strive to be a purist in a language that is not your native tongue, and deeply concerned with the rules. In this paradigm, however, I suspect that the purist speaks mostly to rules. We speak to people. The second tip that will help you to be correct most of the time is that you're better off learning prepositions together with the words surrounding them. Learn them as collocations, which are groups of words that are normally used together. Now, prepositions are little words that are normally placed in front of nouns or pronouns. They help to give information about the logical relationship between the noun or pronoun and the rest of the sentence, in terms of position, space, direction, sequence, etc. My learned friend Sibylle von Spitzen would perhaps dig a little deeper and get meta on this by mentioning things like the Latin origin of the word, its counterpart, the postposition, prepositional phrases, and the wonders of adverbial prose. Nothing is wrong with wanting to dig a little deeper into the meta zone together with Sibylle von Spitzen. Today, however, for those of us who want to dig a little deeper, I will move to give due respect to her words and her sentiments by borrowing only two of them, namely, Google it, and give you some pragmatic stuff today that you can use now. Prepositions can be grouped by type as follows: simple prepositions, double prepositions, compound prepositions, participle prepositions, and phrase prepositions. Prepositions can also be grouped by functionality as follows: for location, position, time, direction or movement, agent, instruments, and phrases. Prepositions of location, place, or position are very close in meaning and sometimes overlap. As a learner of English as a second language, I really do not recommend trying to differentiate them too much right now. Sometimes it's really just a matter of style, and the subtle differences in meaning are inconsequential at best. Examples of prepositions of location, place, and position are above, across, against, among, around, at, behind, below, beneath, beside, between, by, in front of, inside, near, next to, on, opposite, outside, over, under, underneath. Again, I implore you to listen around, look around, read around, and talk a bit. And try to learn their use in collocations, little groups of words that are usually used together. English is not a phonetic language. For my participants, if your goal is developing your pronunciation and your spelling, I suggest that you listen again to this episode, and all the episodes if you must, and read along while you listen. Our goal for today is to look at a few simple, commonly used and therefore important prepositions of location. They are in, on, and at. Now I'll ask you to think position, or better yet, think about location. As you might have guessed, we use these to give information about the location of something. Again, these three are very common and useful. They can be a little bit challenging though, because they can be interchanged, sometimes changing the meaning slightly. However, I do have your best interest at heart, so I will, as promised, be pragmatic and give you examples that you can use now. So here we go. She is at the car. That means at the location of the car, for example. Is he in the car? Sitting in the driver's seat, for example. Am I on the car? Posing on the top of the car for a photo, for example. These are all fine, but the meaning is slightly different each time. You can just as easily say at the bus, in the bus, or on the bus. On the bus is perfectly fine. However, it can also mean on top of the bus if you're into extreme photography, for example, and you want to pose for a special shot. But normally, on the bus usually means the same as in the bus. Regardless of your native language, I would not recommend attempting to translate prepositions. It is November 15th today, 2019, and most of my listeners are still German natives. You can sometimes get away with translating prepositions. Generally, however, even though English is Germanic, I still would not recommend it. In, for example, is used both in English and in German, but it does not always directly translate to mean the same thing. I'll give you some examples. In the sky means am Himmel in German. In the country means auf dem Land. In a photograph means auf einem Bild. In the middle of the show means mitten in der Show. On entspricht in Deutschen nicht immer auf. Example: Spider on the wall means Spinne an der Wand. I am on the second floor means ich bin im zweiten Stock. Man verwendet on, wenn ein Gegenstand auch in der Höhe an etwas befestigt ist. There is a light fixture on the ceiling means an der Decke befindet sich eine Leuchte. There is a painting on the wall means an der Wand hängt ein Gemälde. There is dinner on the table means es gibt Abendessen auf dem Tisch. At entspricht im Deutschen nicht immer an, sondern sehr oft bei. Examples: At the bus stop means an der Bushaltestelle. There is someone at the door means da ist jemand an der Tür. They are both at work means sie sind beide bei der Arbeit. Again, the best way to learn the uses is to study them in collocations, little groups of words that are often used together. You can visualize the meaning to form strong associations. And here's a special tip for you. While trying to remember meaning, think of color, texture, sound, smell, or even taste associations. If you can recruit all the senses while trying to memorize something, this will help. Try to transpose the same meaning to other cases. This works most times. Listen to how native speakers use prepositions in everyday speech or in films. Read books, newspapers, magazines, or listen to more independent media like this. Today's episode brought to you through the proud sponsorship of yours truly. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I always categorically invite you to check out other sources, as many sources as you can. Although I can present you with some good stuff that works now and has helped hundreds of learners that I've taught over the past 12 years, I will not pretend to be any kind of authority on prepositions. Feel free to try a little DIY and check out my article on that at www.trainingtree.de/podcast. Now, I'm well aware of the fact that a lot of my listeners are German. So, ganz kurz und ganz klar zu sein, wie immer, ich lade euch ausdrücklich ein, so viele Quellen wie möglich zu testen. Obwohl ich euch gute Sachen präsentieren kann, die jetzt funktionieren und den Hunderten von Lernenden in den letzten 12 Jahren geholfen haben, werde ich heute nicht vorgeben, irgendeine Art von Autorität über Präpositionen zu sein. Probiere doch einfach mal ein wenig DIY-Englisch aus und schau dir meinen Artikel dazu an unter www.trainingtree.de/podcast. So let's have a quick review of what we looked at. In. Think located in a space. Enclosed spaces, defined by a clear edge or border. Examples: cash in the envelope, pen in my pocket, passenger in the car, cat in the room. In all these cases, there's a clear inside and outside. Think of the object or person, noun or pronoun, surrounded on all sides, like in a building, or the cat in the room, as I just mentioned. Sometimes the borders or edges are less clear, for example, for areas or regions or districts, cities or towns. More examples: I live in Berlin now. I'm recording this episode in Lichtenberg. Different dialects are spoken in different parts of Germany. There are many beautiful castles in Germany. Many of them are in the south. In the south of Germany, you can go for a drive in the mountains. All of these spaces have borders too. You can either be physically inside or outside of these spaces. We can use in for groups of people, or dishes, or liquids, or other substances. Example: he is in the HR team. Although she's an atheist, she sings in the church choir. There is too much sugar in energy drinks. There is never too much good spice in my special jerk sauce. On. Think on a surface, vertical or horizontal. Think flat things like walls or floors or ceilings or roofs or tables for that matter. Even other flat surfaces like bodies of water, like rivers, oceans and lakes. Examples: painting on the wall. There's a spider on the ceiling. My cat is on the table. Sometimes she's on the roof. I live on the 5th floor of the building. Write your name on the piece of paper I gave to you. There is a red boat floating on the lake, or on the ocean, or on the sea. At. Think at a particular location or a point in space, like at a bank, or at the dentist, or at the end of the line. At is also used for public places, addresses, and events. Examples: Little Billy is still at school. His mother hasn't picked him up yet. I saw a strange woman at the bus stop. I saw a strange man at the train station. Turn left at the intersection. Let's meet at the cafe at the corner. Remember to buy some broccoli at the supermarket on your way home. He lives at 110 Princess Street. We met at a wedding. She is singing at the banquet tomorrow. Remember that these are sometimes interchangeable depending on what you want to communicate or what you want your listener to visualize. The talk for today is tools and tips that work. Some more examples for you. We went swimming in the lake. We saw a red boat on the lake. Steffi has a cabin at the lake, or by the lake, or beside the lake. John has a houseboat on the lake. He lost his necklace one day while spearfishing in the lake. Now bear in mind too that in and on can also be used to express time relationships. But ignore that for now, please. That's not our goal for today. Our goal for today is to look at important prepositions of location. In, on, at. That was a lot of stuff. I'm going to invite you again to just pause a bit and let's think a little more about location. Location in space. The idea of three-dimensional, two-dimensional, or one-dimensional for that matter. In helps us to communicate three-dimensional relationships, so to speak. We use it when we want to communicate a feel for a three-dimensional space, like a room. We use in when the relationship of the noun or pronoun within an enclosed three-dimensional space defined by borders or edges is important. On helps us to communicate two-dimensional relationships, so to speak. We use it when we want to communicate a feel for a two-dimensional space, like a table. We use on when we're communicating about the noun or pronoun in relation to the flat surface, horizontal or vertical, or something in between. At is one-dimensional. We use it when we want to communicate a feel for a specific point in space. Think GPS coordinates that you can send with your smartphone to a friend. So, as we come to the end, again, let's be clear on one thing. This format does have its limits. I like to call it a show with benefits. This is by no means a complete lesson on prepositions. There is another place for that. It is also not math, physics, or quantum physics for that matter. Still, let's try to use even more examples. Check out the collocations. And again, try to transpose or interpolate the meanings as they suit you. This is a dialogue. Hey, let's meet at Tom's house. The last time we were there, we had a great time in the kitchen. He placed an entire collection of single malt whiskey on the table. His good wife was still at work when we got there, and by the time she arrived at home and joined us in the kitchen, one bottle was already sitting in the corner on the floor. She paused a bit at the kitchen door, took a quick, slightly surprised look at the 3 glasses sitting on the table, and then promptly said, "We need a 4th. I'm definitely in." Okay, now it's time for a little reflection. Empathy, simply said, is the ability to inhabit another person's feelings. Dictionary.com calls it the physiological identification with or the vicarious experiencing of the feelings, thoughts, or attitudes of another. This is something that I am capable of, depending, of course, on different things like my levels of energy, priorities, my own vested interest, the expressed interest of others, etc. The list of factors is endless. Whatever the case, the degree of empathy felt at any one time varies. It's only natural. Truth be told, it's not always called for, and it's presumptuous to assume that it always is. Reflection is good for learning too. We've almost come to the end of this podcast, and I'd like to invite you to reflect on your own purpose here as I reflect on mine. Ask yourself questions. And now as we reflect, I will borrow a few of my own words from episode 5. We've all been trained to dislike the idea of monologue, even though many good things start with reflection, looking inward, in a dialogue, like seeking to change your world by changing yourself, as a wise woman once said. Or rather than asking someone else for the meanings of new words all the time, simply start by asking yourself. There is nothing wrong with talking to yourself. You can ask yourself questions. You can even answer yourself as though you were talking to someone else. It's also perfectly fine to do that, as long as you never take sides, as a wise man once said. Now, some of these thoughts or approaches might seem a little fluffy at first, but they might prove to be more interesting and important when we try to develop our fluency. So all in way of saying, what exactly? I am saying that I definitely understand how you might feel about prepositions. I think I feel the same way about German articles. We'll talk about English articles another day, by the way. The talk for today is tools and tips that work. With a small win is always a good way to begin. Okay then, we've come to the end of this episode 16 of the English Coach podcast and the end of season 1. Who knows what the future will bring? Some things will perhaps change. However, the goal is the same. Still doing this chiefly for my people, present and past course participants. It's available nonetheless to everyone. Feel free to check out the show notes for this episode at www.trainingtree.de/podcast. Like it if you like it, and if you don't, lie to me. Just kidding. But still, feel free to share it with a friend, post a rating, or better yet, write me some feedback. This will help it to help you as it is intended to do. To be honest, praise is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for feedback that will help the show develop. So then, subscribe only if you feel like, so you know when there's a new episode available. Thanks for listening. Looking forward to hearing from you, and bye for now.